The gang leader pressed the gun against the old man's forehead. "Your money or your life." The old man just smiled. "Son," he said in a calm voice, "I've been dancing with death for 50 years. You weren't even born yet." The gang leader burst out laughing. He had no idea he'd be crying in 2 hours. Thursday morning, October 3rd. Frank Morrison woke at 5:30 a.m. like he had every day for 60 years. Military habits die hard, even when the military's been done with you for decades. His small apartment in East Los Angeles wasn't much. One bedroom, peeling paint on the walls, a radiator that clanged like it was fighting its own war every night. But it was his, paid for with blood, sweat, and a pension that barely covered the basics. At 79, Frank's body was a roadmap of violence that most people couldn't even imagine. Shrapnel from Vietnam still lodged in his right leg, making every step a negotiation with pain. A bullet scar from 1969 carved deep into his left shoulder, a permanent reminder of a firefight in a village whose name he still couldn't pronounce. 3 fingers on his left hand didn't bend right anymore, courtesy of a Viet Cong interrogator who'd tried for 6 hours to make him talk. He never did. Frank pulled on his usual uniform for civilian life. A faded blue shirt he'd bought at Goodwill 5 years ago, khaki pants worn soft from 1,000 washes, and that 40-year-old veteran cap with just USN embroidered on it. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed hero. Just 3 letters that meant everything and nothing to the people passing by. He made instant coffee. The good stuff was too expensive now, and sat by his window, watching East Los Angeles wake up. Gang tags covered every surface, trash filled the gutters, but he also saw families heading to work, kids walking to school with backpacks bigger than they were, life persisting despite everything. Just like in the war zones, life always found a way. Today was the 3rd of the month, Pension Day, the day Frank Morrison would perform his monthly ritual, walk 2 blocks with his cane tapping against the cracked sidewalk, withdraw part of his pension from the Chase Bank ATM on the corner, buy groceries, pay for his heart medication, and somehow make it all stretch until next month. The October air in East Los Angeles carried that rare crispness that made breathing feel like a gift instead of a chore. Frank stepped out at 9:30 a.m. sharp, his wooden cane in his right hand, something he'd carved himself when the VA hospital said they couldn't afford to give him a better one. Budget cuts, they'd said. He'd just nodded. He'd heard worse excuses for worse situations. The walk to the bank took 15 minutes now. Used to take 5, back when his body still remembered how to move without every joint screaming in protest. Frank passed the same people he always did. Mrs. Chen sweeping outside her restaurant, never making eye contact, probably thought he was homeless. The guys outside the auto shop who sometimes laughed when he walked by, making jokes about the old drunk, even though Frank hadn't touched alcohol since 1976. But here's what nobody watching the old man shuffle down Vermont Avenue knew. From 1968 to 1975, Frank Morrison had been something else entirely. Staff Sergeant Morrison, SEAL Team 2, 3 tours in Vietnam, 17 operations in Laos and Cambodia that still weren't in any official record, and never would be. His call sign had been Ghost, earned because of his ability to infiltrate enemy positions, eliminate targets, and extract without leaving a trace. 182 confirmed kills, each one burned into his memory like a brand, each one necessary, each one a weight he carried every single day. The Chase Bank ATM sat in a small alcove between a check-cashing place and a liquor store. Not the safest spot, but Frank had been in worse, much worse, places where the air itself wanted to kill you. He inserted his card with fingers that trembled slightly. Not from fear, never from fear, but from age and old injuries that never quite healed right. The pin pad glowed in the morning shade. He typed carefully, 0511, May 11th, 1969, the day he'd pulled his entire team out of a burning village in the Mekong Delta after their helicopter went down. 8 men saved. 3 of them still sent him Christmas cards when they remembered. $800. That's all he needed. $400 for rent. $200 for his heart medication and blood pressure pills. $200 for food and utilities. Simple needs for a simple life. The machine counted bills with that familiar mechanical rhythm. 20, 40, 60. Frank folded each bill carefully, a habit from the field where every piece of gear had to be secured, every detail checked twice. "Hey, old-timer." Frank didn't turn immediately. He finished collecting his cash, slipped it into his wallet with deliberate calm. Only then did he turn around. Slow, no sudden movements. Age had taught him that much. That and survival. 4 of them. Early 20s, maybe younger. Hoodies pulled up despite the warm morning sun. The one in front, clearly the leader, had that hungry look Frank recognized, the same look he'd seen in young soldiers desperate to prove themselves, except these boys were proving themselves to the wrong people. The leader had a face tattoo reading "Kill" across his left cheekbone, the kind of ink you get in county jail to prove you're harder than you really are. Marcus Williams was his name, though Frank didn't know that yet. Behind him stood 3 others. Rico, the youngest at maybe 19, nervous energy radiating off him like heat. Deshaun, heavy-set, trying to look bored, but his eyes darting everywhere, cataloging exits. Terrell, quiet, hanging back, the one who'd run first if things went bad. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Frank asked, voice steady as bedrock. Marcus stepped forward, and that's when Frank saw the gun. A Glock 19, from the look of it, held sideways like in the movies, which told Frank everything he needed to know about the boy's training, or complete lack thereof. "Yeah, you can help," Marcus said, trying to make his voice deeper than it was. "Empty your pockets. Everything. Now." The few people around the ATM scattered like roaches when lights turn on. A mother grabbed her toddler and rushed into the grocery store, not looking back. An elderly couple at the bus stop hobbled away as fast as arthritis would allow. Someone, Frank, couldn't see who, fumbled with their phone, trying to dial 911 with shaking fingers. Frank looked at the gun, then at Marcus's eyes. Dilated pupils, twitchy movements, that false confidence that comes from chemicals rather than courage, probably high on meth. In Vietnam, Frank had learned to read men's eyes in the space between heartbeats. This one was all desperation wrapped in drug-fueled bravado. "That's my pension money," Frank said quietly, not pleading, just stating a fact. "I need it for my heart medication." Marcus pressed the barrel against Frank's forehead. The metal was cold, a familiar sensation that took Frank back 50 years in an instant. Different gun, different jungle, but the same cold kiss of potential death. "Do I look like I give a damn about your medication, old man?" And that's when Frank smiled. Not a big smile, not mocking, just a small upturn of his lips that had once made a North Vietnamese colonel step back during an interrogation in 1971. The smile of a man who'd made friends with death so long ago that the threat of it was like meeting an old acquaintance at the grocery store. "Son," Frank said, his voice calm as a lake at dawn, "I've been dancing with death for 50 years. You weren't even born yet." The gang burst out laughing. Marcus pushed the gun harder against Frank's skin, leaving a small red circle that would bruise later. "What are you? Some kind of tough guy? You can barely stand without that cane." Frank's eyes never wavered, steady as a sniper's breathing. In, hold, out. The rhythm that had kept him alive through 3 tours and 17 operations that didn't exist. "I'm not trying to be tough," Frank said. "I'm just telling you the truth." Rico, shifting nervously from foot to foot, suddenly pointed at Frank's arm. "Yo, Marcus, check his arm." Peeking out from under Frank's rolled-up sleeve was a tattoo. Faded by time and sun, but still visible to anyone who knew what to look for. An eagle clutching a trident, and an anchor. Below it, barely legible, Team 2. And under that, a number that would have made anyone with military knowledge freeze. 1A2. "Man's got military ink," Rico said, suddenly less sure about this whole situation. Marcus shrugged, but Frank caught the micro-expression of uncertainty that flashed across his face. So what? Probably some supply clerk playing soldier, Navy cook or something. But even as he said it, Marcus's voice carried less confidence. Something about the old man's stillness was wrong. Most old people shook when you put a gun to their head. This one was steady as stone. "Give me the wallet, old man. Now." Frank reached into his back pocket with practiced economy of motion. No wasted movement. He handed over the worn leather wallet, a gift from his late wife in 1981, 2 years before cancer took her. Marcus grabbed it, pulled out the $800 in 20s, and tossed the wallet on the ground like trash. Credit cards, VA medical card, driver's license, and an old photograph scattered across the concrete. The photograph landed face up. SEAL Team 2, 1969, standing in front of a Huey helicopter. 15 young faces, hard and lean, eyes that had already seen too much. Frank stood in the center, sergeant's stripes on his sleeve. Only 3 of those men were still alive. "Phone 2, Marcus demanded, not noticing the photo. Frank pulled out his phone. Not an iPhone or Android, an ancient flip phone held together with electrical tape and what his neighbor's kid called hope and prayer. The screen was cracked from dropping it last year, but it still worked. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the bank walls. "What is this? From a museum? You robbed this from a time capsule, Grandpa?" He flipped it open, checking for hidden cash some old people kept. The contact list had exactly 1 entry. Phoenix. "Who's Phoenix? Your girlfriend? Your nurse?" "Just an old friend," Frank said, and as he said it, his right index finger pressed something in his pocket. A small device no bigger than a car key fob. Silent, invisible, but very, very active. The thing about Frank Morrison that these boys couldn't know, that nobody in this neighborhood knew, was that he'd never really left the SEALs behind. The Brotherhood didn't end with discharge papers. Once Team 2, always Team 2. And the device in his pocket, installed by his former teammate Jake Sullivan 10 years ago, just in case, had just sent out a signal that would change everything in the next 15 minutes. Deshawn stepped forward and kicked Frank's cane away. It clattered across the concrete, spinning to a stop against the wall 10 feet away. "Let's see you dance now, old man." Frank stumbled without the cane's support. His bad leg, the one full of Vietnamese shrapnel that the VA doctors said would be too dangerous to remove, buckled. He caught himself on the ATM for a moment, hand pressed against the cold metal, then slowly, with as much dignity as he could manage, lowered himself to the ground. His knees protested minus bone on bone, the cartilage long gone, his back screamed from 3 compressed vertebrae, souvenirs from a helicopter crash in 1971. Marcus stood over him, gun pointed down like an executioner. "Not so tough now, are you?" Frank looked up at him, and for just a moment, Marcus saw something in those old eyes that made his finger ease off the trigger. Something ancient and dangerous, like looking into a cave and knowing something lived in the darkness. Something that had been there long before you were born and would be there long after you were gone. "I haven't been tough in years," Frank admitted, his voice carrying no shame, just fact. "Just too stubborn to die." "Well, maybe today's your lucky day," Marcus said, trying to recapture his bravado, waving the gun carelessly. Terrell, the quiet one, finally spoke up. "Yo, we got the money. Let's bounce." "Yeah," Marcus agreed. He looked down at Frank one more time, then threw the flip phone at him. It hit the concrete next to his hand, the screen cracking further but somehow still glowing with that one contact, Phoenix. "Thanks for the donation, Grandpa. Buy yourself a better phone with your next check." He paused, then added with a sneer, "If you live that long." They walked away laughing, counting the money, high-fiving each other. Easy score. Just another old fool who thought his military service from ancient history meant something on these streets. They turned the corner, heading toward their usual hangout, a warehouse about 6 blocks east, where the East Side Riders conducted their business. Frank sat on the cold concrete for a moment, watching them disappear. A small crowd had gathered at a safe distance, phones out, recording the aftermath but not the crime itself. Nobody had stepped forward to help. Nobody had called out. This was East LA. You minded your own business if you wanted to keep breathing. He reached for his phone with fingers that now shook, not from fear, but from rage carefully controlled, and locked away. The cracked screen showed a new message. "Location received, Phoenix activated. ETA 15 minutes. Stay put. Minders Jake." Frank allowed himself a small smile. Those boys had no idea what they'd just set in motion. A bank employee rushed out. Jessica, according to her name tag, maybe 25, with kind eyes and hands that fluttered nervously like birds. "Oh my God, sir. Are you okay? I saw everything through the window. I'm calling the police right now." "No need," Frank said, accepting her help to stand. His joints protested every movement, but he'd moved through worse pain. "It's being handled." "But they robbed you. They had a gun. They could have killed you." Frank picked up his scattered cards, moving slowly, deliberately. The photograph from 1969 had a boot print on it now. He wiped it clean with his shirt and tucked it carefully back in his wallet. Those faces deserved better than to be on the ground. "Death and I have an understanding," he said, more to himself than to Jessica. Today wasn't the day. Jessica helped him to a bench inside the bank, hovering like a worried daughter. "At least let me call an ambulance. You might be hurt. That fall looked bad." "I've been hurt worse," Frank said, settling onto the bench with a small groan he couldn't quite suppress. "Just need to sit a minute." She brought him water in a small paper cup. Frank took it with hands that had steadied a rifle through a 3-day firefight but now trembled with age. "Those guys," Jessica said, lowering her voice as if they might hear. "They're East Side riders. Everyone knows them. They hit people around here all the time. The police never catch them. Or when they do, they're out the next day." "Someone will catch them," Frank said with absolute certainty. "How can you be so sure?" Frank took a sip of water, thought about how to answer. "Because I made a call." Jessica looked confused, glancing at his broken phone. "But they took your— Wait, you called someone?" "In a way." Exactly 14 minutes and 30 seconds after the robbery, the bank's windows started vibrating. It started as a low rumble, the kind you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. Jessica looked up from her desk where she'd been hovering, pretending to work while keeping an eye on Frank. "Is that thunder?" she asked, glancing at the clear sky outside. Frank stood up slowly, straightening his shirt, brushing dust from his pants. "No, that's a Suburban. 3 of them, actually. Probably doing about 60 down Vermont." The black vehicles appeared like sharks cutting through traffic. Not speeding recklessly, but moving with purpose, other cars instinctively moving aside. They pulled up outside the bank in perfect formation, a choreography practiced in places where mistakes meant death. The doors opened in perfect synchronization. 8 men stepped out, civilian clothes, jeans, shirts, baseball caps, but their bearing screamed military. The way they moved, each covering a sector without being told. The way their hands stayed visible but ready. The way their eyes catalogued every face, every exit, every potential threat in less than 2 seconds. The lead man entered the bank. 6'2", built like he could bench press a small car but carry a wounded teammate for miles. Salt and pepper beard trimmed with military precision, eyes the color of the ocean during a storm. His name was Jake Sullivan, Commander, SEAL Team 5, though he wore no uniform, no rank, no insignia except a small trident pin on his baseball cap that most people wouldn't even notice. Frank had trained Jake as a rookie in 1973, green kid from an Iowa farm who'd joined the Navy because he'd never seen the ocean. Couldn't swim when he arrived at Bud/. Frank had spent extra hours in the pool, teaching him not just to swim, but to become one with the water. 2 years later, Jake had saved Frank's life in a rice paddy outside Saigon, carrying him 2 miles with 3 bullets in Frank's back and mortar fire dropping around them like deadly rain. Ghost. Phoenix. They met in the middle of the bank, and Jake embraced Frank. Not a bro hug, not a quick pat on the back, but a real embrace. The kind that says, "I would die for you," without words. The kind earned in blood and kept in silence. "You okay?" "I'm vertical," Frank said. "That's enough." Jake pulled back, his hands still on Frank's shoulders, assessing, looking for injuries the old warrior wouldn't admit to. "How many?" "4. East Side Riders. Leader has kill tattooed on his face. Probably Marcus Williams if the local intel is right. They got 800. Jake's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "They put hands on you?" "Pushed me down. Nothing I haven't handled before." "That's not the point." Jake pulled out his phone. Not a normal phone, military encrypted satellite phone, the kind that worked anywhere on Earth and couldn't be traced or tapped. He dialed a number from memory. Colonel Wilson. Sullivan. Yeah, it's about Ghost. He paused, listening. 4 suspects. Armed robbery. Assault on a decorated veteran. I need federal jurisdiction. Yes, sir. He's one of ours. Navy Cross recipient. That's right. The one from Mekong. Roger that. He hung up and turned to his team. 3 of them had entered the bank, taking positions that looked casual but covered every angle. The others remained outside, invisible deterrent to anyone thinking about approaching. Gentlemen, Jake said to his team, we have work to do. One of Jake's men, Rodriguez, was already on a laptop in the Suburban, fingers flying across keys. Former NSA, now private sector, but still had friends in very interesting places. Commander, Rodriguez called out. I've got them on traffic cams. 4 suspects, matching description. They're heading east on Whittier Boulevard. Looks like, yeah, they're going to that warehouse. Known gang hangout. 1847 Industrial Way. How do you know all this so fast? Jessica asked, peering out the window, amazed at the efficiency. Jake glanced at her, and his expression softened slightly. Ma'am, when someone hurts one of ours, we don't wait for paperwork. Frank stood up, reaching for his cane, which Jake had already retrieved. Jake, I don't need. Sit down, Ghost. This isn't your fight anymore. They're just kids. Stupid, dangerous kids. But Jake's voice was calm but hard as steel. Kids who assaulted a man who earned 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Silver Stars, and a Navy Cross. Kids who pushed down someone who carried me through 2 miles of jungle with 3 bullets in his back. Kids who robbed someone who has 182 confirmed kills and still chooses to let them live. The bank had gone completely silent. Jessica's mouth was open. Other customers stood frozen. Rodriguez looked up. Commander, LAPD SWAT is asking if we want backup. Tell them to set a perimeter. But do not engage. This is personal. Frank knew that tone. Jake, don't kill them. Wouldn't dream of it, Ghost. But they're going to learn something today. 45 minutes after the robbery, Marcus was sitting in the warehouse, counting money and laughing with his crew. The place reeked of weed and motor oil. Yo, that old fool really thought he was tough. Marcus laughed, mimicking Frank's voice. I've been dancing with death. Man, he was dancing all right, on the ground. Rico wasn't laughing as hard. Something about that old man bothered him. The tattoo. The number 1012. The way he didn't beg or cry. Marcus, I don't know, man. That military tattoo. What if he's connected? Connected to what? A retirement home? That's when they heard it. Or rather, didn't hear it. The warehouse went quiet. Too quiet. Where's Tiny? Carol asked about their lookout. Then the lights went out. Not a power failure. Instant darkness except for green emergency lights. Flashbang grenades detonated at every entrance. White light, screaming sound. Marcus tried to run but couldn't see. Tried to shoot, but his hand was empty. He was on the ground, zip-tied, before he could understand what happened. When his vision cleared, 8 men stood around them in perfect tactical formation. Jake walked in slowly, sat on a crate eye level with Marcus. You know what you did wrong? Marcus spit at him. Jake moved slightly, dodging it. You robbed the wrong old man. Jake pulled out a tablet, showed Marcus a photo. Young Frank Morrison in dress uniform, chest covered in medals. Staff Sergeant Frank Morrison, SEAL Team 2. The man you pushed down saved my life in 1973. Saved 37 other American soldiers. Has more confirmed kills than your entire gang combined times 10. Marcus's eyes widened. But that's not why you're in trouble. You're in trouble because he pressed a panic button. And that button doesn't call the cops. It calls us. Who are you? We're the ones who remember. The ones who don't forget. The ones who protect our own. Jake pulled out his phone, dialed. Yeah, it's done. 4 in custody. No casualties. Yeah, he's fine. Want to talk to them? He handed the phone to Marcus. Someone wants to speak with you. Marcus took it with shaking hands. Hello. Mr. Williams. This is Admiral Peterson, Joint Special Operations Command. You assaulted one of my men today. I didn't know. That's the problem. You didn't care to know. That man has given more for this country than you could comprehend. You have two choices. Federal prison for armed robbery of a veteran, 15 years minimum, or what? Or you meet with Sergeant Morrison. You listen to his story. You volunteer at the VA hospital for 1 year, every single day. Miss once, those 15 become 25. Marcus looked at Jake's cold eyes. I'll take the second option. Good choice, but understand, we'll be watching. 3 days later, Marcus found Frank at his usual diner. No gang colors, hair cut short. Frank gestured to the seat across from him. Coffee? Marcus sat down, fidgeting. Why didn't you let them kill us? Frank took a sip of coffee. You ever kill anyone, son? No. It stays with you. Every face, every name if you learn it. I've got 182 of them up here. He tapped his temple. I see them when I close my eyes. Then why did you do it? Because someone had to. Because my brothers needed me. Because the alternative was watching good men die. But you're not at war. You're just lost. I start at the VA tomorrow. You'll be helping heroes, men and women who gave everything. You'll learn what real sacrifice looks like. 6 months passed. Marcus showed up at the VA every day. First month, he hated it. Second month, he tolerated it. By the third month, something had shifted. One day, Frank visited for his checkup. He saw Marcus helping a Marine named Williams into his wheelchair, both laughing. Ghost, Williams called out. You know this kid? We've met. Marcus's eyes widened when Williams said, Lucky men don't get Navy Crosses. You got a Navy Cross? It's in a box somewhere. How's the volunteering? I signed up for another year, and I'm applying to community college. Want to be a physical therapist. That night, Jake called Frank. Turn on Channel 7. Marcus was on TV, being interviewed about his new program, Second Chance Brotherhood, pairing former gang members with veterans. At the launch event, when Frank entered, everyone stood. Marcus presented him with a Guardian Angel Award. Frank took the microphone. I'm no angel, just an old soldier who got lucky enough to grow old. If my story helps one person choose a better path, maybe those 182 faces I see every night can rest easier. 2 years later, Marcus graduated with honors. You saved my life, he told Frank. You saved yourself. No, you showed me I was worth saving. There's a difference. 5 years after the robbery, Frank Morrison passed away peacefully. He was 84. His funeral brought seals from every generation, but the front row was filled with young men in suits, former gang members from the Second Chance Brotherhood. Marcus gave the eulogy. Frank Morrison killed 182 enemy combatants in war, but he saved over 300 young men from the streets of LA. The ATM where it all started now has a plaque. At this spot, Frank Ghost Morrison chose forgiveness over violence, starting a movement that saved hundreds of lives. A warrior's greatest victory is peace, and somewhere beyond this life, Frank Morrison finally sleeps without seeing those 182 faces, because he saved twice as many as he took. That's how a ghost finds peace. 2 hours changed everything, but the echo lasts forever.